Beth McDougall is founder and medical director of Clear Center of Health in Mill Valley, California. Long known as a medical detective, Dr. McDougall excels at unraveling complex multifactorial conditions and specializes in helping patients with chronic illness and neurodegenerative diseases. That's a big word for a Texas boy. She is advancing a new paradigm, one at the intersection of medicine and contemporary physics, to transform the practice of medicine and unlock the secrets to radical healing. Her book, introducing this new paradigm, Your Pristine Blueprint, is due out in the summer of 2021. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Beth McDougall.
Thank you so much, Randy. And thanks to everybody. I'm truly honored to be here. And what a nice way to open up with this meditation. And also I want to say I share your mission. I think we're aligned in mission.
Do you want to start by just sharing a little bit about your mission and your book?
Sure. Well, my mission is to help people completely unravel complex health conditions. And in so doing, it leads to an elevation in consciousness. Because I believe that the work that we need to do in order to accomplish achieving optimal health really requires clearing everything that's in the way for us to embody our highest sense of self. So that's my mission, and that's what I tried my best to do with people.
How did you get here? How did you get here on your journey?
Well, I mean, it starts way back and just kind of coming into this life with an understanding about the energetic nature of reality and seeming to have recollection of a time when human beings remembered their potential and realized their full potential. And so then being kind of embodied in this life and realizing that people had somehow forgotten, what they're capable of, and also didn't have a very, in my opinion, accurate understanding about the nature of reality. That was a little frustrating to myself as a young person. And so I, really date this back to as early as I can remember, at age 4, 5, 6. And then I was fortunate enough, just really blessed to have a fascinating childhood mentor. My parents were artists, and my dad was a really gifted metal sculptor. And so one of his patrons that was collecting his work became a good friend of our family. And he was an interesting man. He was a mystic and a physician himself. He was a surgeon, a scientist, and spent a lot of time studying things like sacred geometry, physics, knew a lot about the nature of reality. He had an encyclopedic mind. And so I spent a lot of time with him growing up, and he taught me well and just kind of nurtured my understanding about the nature of reality. And then when I was 15, he developed Parkinson's disease, and he experienced a rapid decline in his physical function. And then his disease began to affect his mind. And so I watched this person who was so important to me, who was so brilliant and had this, mind that was so incredible. I watched that deteriorate, and it was really heartbreaking. And right around the exact same time, my grandfather, who was also someone very, very important to me, developed a different neurodegenerative disease. So he developed something called multi-system atrophy. And it's where the mind remains intact, but you lose the ability to control your body. So, he couldn't walk. He couldn't even keep his eyes steady. They darted back and forth. And he was confined to a hospital bed in a VA nursing home. So it was just like watching this happen kind of like from about age 15 on to my mid 20s was just so profoundly influential, because I remembered back to that kind of knowing I came into this life with, of that this, we have the potential to heal, we have the potential to live our fullest life. And I just knew that this sort of thing really didn't need to happen. This sort of thing, could be prevented, and potentially when someone develops an illness like this, it should be reversible. So, I had to set out on a path at that point, really trying to kind of chart my own course to learn what I needed to learn in order to help people that have these complex illnesses. And then I ended up having an experience with my own health back in about 2004 that taught me a lot. So I ended up getting Lyme disease. And at first I didn't know it was Lyme disease, but I started having neurological symptoms myself and had this multi-$1,000 workup in the hospital. Western medicine really couldn't provide any answers. And then I discovered that I had Lyme disease and had to treat that. And it took me almost a decade to fully unravel that. But I'm so grateful for that experience, because it took me down, this road of really understanding how to kind of unearth the hidden determinants of illness, and really kind of clear what the dissonance that allowed that illness to take hold in the first place. And so my book is really about kind of, what I learned from what I came into this life with, what I learned from my childhood mentor, what I learned from my own studies, and then from my 23-year medical practice, and then my own personal journey of healing from Lyme disease.
Could you, that was fascinating. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the clearing of the dissonance? That's something I'd love to understand how you went about that in more depth a little bit, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for example, I'll use myself as an example here, because it illustrates it really well. So I got Lyme disease, and my colleagues urged me to take long-term antibiotics. And I got onto some antibiotics because I had central nervous system Lyme disease, and very quickly realized, okay, this is not going to work for me. I had horrible side effects to them. Some of those were really scary side effects. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to do that. It's just, and the whole chemical warfare mentality there wasn't really sitting well with me. Not to say that there isn't a place for antibiotics, like some people need them for periods of time. But anyway, I ended up having to forge my own path with herbs and oxidative treatments and homeopathy and some intravenous nutrient therapies and things like that. But what I noticed is that I wasn't able to fully eradicate the infection working exclusively on a physical level. I noticed that the infection, it felt like, kind of took hold in areas where I had stagnicity in my body, where the energy didn't flow very well. So those were areas of postural misalignment, for example. Like I kind of had a posture that was where my shoulders were up a little bit, my head was forward a little bit, like so many people do. And then what I realized is that in order to really understand why I had that posture, I had to kind of delve deeply into how my biography was encoded in my energetic anatomy and in my physical body. And that required that I delve into meditation and really begin to kind of explore my energetic anatomy and really get to understand what my unique energetic signature was, and so that I could see what was highlighted against that. So like if there was any foreign signatures in my system. And so as I learned how to tune in, it's like a whole world of information opened up for me. I was able to really understand how, we store in our energetic system and then in our bodies in a vibratory manner really what has happened to us, our traumas that we've experienced, and even our kind of familial and societal conditioning that affects how we feel about ourselves and how we view ourselves. And so all of those things have like information signatures associated with them. When you think about a trauma, that happens to somebody, more than likely, if it happens at a young age, the person isn't fully equipped to deal with all of the emotions around that situation. And so it just ends up getting stored, and you think about the emotions, is like you've got all the energetic vibrations of all the neurotransmitters and hormones associated with that emotion, and then those kind of stay in the system and reverberate there. And of course these affect then how we feel about ourselves, as I was saying, and then that's going to affect the choices we make later on. It's going to affect how we view the world. And what I found is that these kind of like energetic complexes in the body almost act like lenses through which we see the world and through which we kind of project onto other people and situations, and it influences the way we perceive other people and situations. So not only does this begin to affect our health on a physical level, but it really affects our life as a whole, and how we interact with the world. So as I became aware of this and started clearing these things, I noticed that then, like, for example, my life force flowed back into areas that were previously stagnant. My posture finally did change. And it's like then the life force and the blood flow was able to kind of rush back in, and my immune system could get to work and start eradicating the infection in those areas. So I kind of saw how this, you've got to work it on all levels in order to fully move through something like this.
You know what really blew my mind about what you just said was that like a lot of the answers, or all of the answers to what you needed to heal, were inside you. Is that correct? In my hearing, that basically you had to figure out where the energy was stuck, which means, like, in a way, we have to take part in our own healing.
Absolutely. And so then that really brought me on a journey of learning about energetic anatomy, the human biofield, the chakras, and I had known about these things before, but really to study them in depth and experience them and spend a lot of time in a body-centered meditation, and then just to really fully understand how the human biofield and the chakras are kind of an interface between our biology and the world at large. And they have such profound influence on our physiology. The chakras are kind of step up and step down transformers of energy that really can transform subtle energies coming from the environment into the chemical and sonic language of our bodies, by altering nerve signals and the release of hormones and things like that. So they're absolutely indispensably related to our physiology. And if a person has stuck energy in a certain part of their biofield or in their chakras, it's going to affect their physiology. And I don't believe you can fully resolve a health condition without clearing on that level. And so then as I kind of went on this journey myself, then I started realizing that I could potentially help people to go on a similar journey themselves. I could never do the journey for them, because it all boils down in the end to you doing the work. But I think I was able to kind of create an environment that and hold space for people, and help to highlight certain things when it was appropriate, but hold space for people to do this kind of work on their own. And the other thing I think when you asked me about the book, so that kind of experience helped me kind of move to really looking at our health in a much, much larger context. So like to not even look at just kind of body, mind, spirit, and energetic system or energetic anatomy, but then to look at how our energetic anatomy is part of this field of energy and information that we live within. And our bodies emerge from this field, are just like everything else in our physical reality. And so to really look at health holistically, it requires taking a quantum leap up in our kind of view of ourselves as absolutely connected to everything else, the field at large and every other aspect of creation.
So that was incredible. We had somebody ask a question, and anybody else who has a question, feel free to raise your hand. But Rhonda had said that, Dr. Beth, I also recovered from Lyme. I'm curious, have you noticed a pattern too between a disease and particular emotional energies?
Mm-hmm.
If so, would you have some examples? That makes sense.
Yeah. So I think about Lyme, even though it's a bacteria, as a parasite of sorts. It's a bacteria that comes in and has multiple phases in its life cycle, and one of those phases is an intracellular phase, and it blocks the mitochondrial production of energy, as among many other things. And so it's almost like zapping your energy, and so you can think about it like a parasite. So I think people are more vulnerable. Let's just step back for a second. There's going to be somebody out there who gets bit by a tick, maybe takes 3 weeks of antibiotics, they're over it, it's done. That's a little different scenario. But when you're talking about an issue with chronic Lyme, and usually it's Lyme and some of its friends, like the co-infections like Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia, some of the viruses, they all kind of tend to cluster together and kind of enter the body when you're bit by a tick. And so when you have a situation where things are chronic and it's really hard to get rid of them, that's when you really need to be thinking much more broadly about the situation. And I think that a lot of times it's when people have boundary violations earlier in life. It's almost like their energetic system is violated in some way, where there's a rift in that, in their energetic field, and that becomes familiar to the being growing up, so that it's something that they become accustomed to. And so the person might become accustomed to having other people's energy and different vibrations that are foreign to their own body and their own energetic vibration in their space. And I think then later that's a setup for developing chronic infections. It's almost as if the pathogens can slide in on the same energetic breach. And so the underpinning there, could be almost any type of a traumatic experience. It doesn't have to be a sexual trauma or physical abuse, but sometimes it's just having someone who has really bad boundaries in your early childhood experience, and they're invasive with their energy. So in any of those cases, there's some sort of energetic breach that then the person becomes accustomed to.
Wow, that is unbelievable. Joe, with your hand up, brother.
All right, I'm stoked right now because Dr. Beth, I saw your video of the pristine blueprint, and it really excites me when a doctor who goes through the conventional medical system discovers that there's something amiss and that there's deeper truths to be discovered. So I'm super excited to just hear the way that you're unraveling little things and taking them back to pieces that exist far prior to whatever infection starts or any of that. I actually have a question, and this just happened to me recently. I went through a ceremony, and before my ceremony, I was served hape, and I have a deviated septum. And my shaman had suggested to me, and I was really taken back by it, because I'm personally, I try to avoid any invasive processes to my body that I don't deem super necessary. So if it's a surgery, I mean, it would have to be like, I would really have to need that surgery in order to get it. Other than that, I'm not going to cut myself open unless I really need to. But I had told them that I had a deviated septum. And I had also told him that a part of my life, I suffered pretty severely from anxiety at one point. And I was able to unravel a lot of that through meditation and a lot of the techniques that we use here on the Healing Collective. But he had said something that was really interesting to me. And he said, well, you know, man, you're not getting a lot of oxygen up that right side of that your nostril. And I primarily nose breathe. I try to breathe through my nose as much as possible, even at night when I sleep. And he's like, you know, man, that could really be having an effect on the amount of oxygen that's getting to your brain, because you're missing one of the, it's not coming through completely. And he's like, I would actually suggest that you look at some options to maybe get that fixed. And I was like, oh my God, really? I wouldn't expect this coming from my shaman. So basically what I'm asking is that, do you think that having something like that physical impediment, it's almost like having something that's structurally, you know, amiss in my body, could that actually be affecting maybe my neurological capabilities or sleep capability, anything like that?
Potentially. Yeah, potentially it could be. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that we need all kinds of medicine. You know, I think that Western medicine has its place and really excels in the area of surgery and, you know, accidents and helping people in emergency situations. It's just not so great at unwinding the kind of chronic, more insidious illnesses that are usually multifactorial. But in the case like this, where, you know, maybe at one point, did you have an injury that, yeah. So that was right. So then you might want to correct it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Because it's interesting that he's like, he'd even attributed it to where that particular oxygen is serving a particular side of my brain, and that particular side of my brain is also attributed to where your fight or flight actions come in. And I could actually have been experiencing maybe some of my anxiety from the fact that I might not have been getting quality breath through that side of my face. You know what I mean? So it's just like to attribute it, like all things have a place to lead down to, you know.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's really, that's cool to see that, like, you know, when you break it down, even simplest things is like, you know, some people take a lot of medications and things for anxiety and go down that road, but if you just dig deep enough, it could just be literally a physiological thing that's just not working correctly, and information's not traveling the way it's necessarily supposed to. And then a procedure may be able to prevent you from having to go through years of medication use or years of neurological damage from just dealing with that particular thing. So I'm just super grateful for the work that you're doing, and that you're taking that leading edge step to go out and say there's other ways and there's bigger things than just our Western medicine.
Yeah.
It's deeper.
Thank you. Well, yeah. And yeah, so everything has its place. And I, you know, on my journey, I really began to study physics and actually the nature of reality more, because I kind of got this sense, and I had it actually as a young child, but then it came back later, which was there's healing, and then there's also the creation of reality. You know, so is it possible that we can recreate ourselves in a more perfect state? You know, so the end effect looks like healing, but so that got me really looking at kind of the nature of reality. And one, you know, so there's kind of two concepts that came out of my study that really have influenced me today. One is that we live in this sea of energy and information, you know, so that there's this continuous sea of almost infinite energy and information, and everything emerges out of that. And so therefore everything is just a unique manifestation of this one underlying thing or system. So that was one concept. And the other concept that was incredibly influential was that matter is not static. It's actually forming and annihilating trillions of times a second. And that's the atom, the subatomic particles, that's the molecules, and it's actually even our physical form is forming and annihilating every trillions of times a second. Everything in our known universe is doing that. And so if that is happening every time it reforms, how are we reforming into this complex multicellular organism where we have 37 trillion cells, each with 100 trillion atoms? We have millions or billions of chemical reactions happening in each of these cells in a coordinated manner every second. So how is that happening, that we're reforming and right away into this exquisite level of complexity? And so I believe that there is a blueprint, like a pristine blueprint of sorts that forms when the sperm of our father penetrates the egg of our mother, and right at that moment of conception, a blueprint is formed that's influenced by our unique genetics. It's influenced by astrological influences at the moment of our conception, and also by our soul and all of the past life experiences that we've had, and all the cultural contexts that we've lived in, and all of our experiences and what we've learned from those. And so all of those things can imprint into influencing the formation of this blueprint. And then the blueprint becomes a template along which our physical form develops as we're developing as an embryo, and also contains the operating instructions to coordinate and orchestrate our exquisitely complex physiology. So when I started thinking about it that way, I started thinking about, well, then what determines illness? What determines illness and what confers health? It's really, health would be if the blueprint is translating well. If the original operating instructions are translating into our physical form every trillionth of a second. And illness is when that process gets compromised. So the instruction set and the template, there's something in the way of its translation that diminishes the fidelity of the blueprint's coding. And so then what are those things? What is in the way? Every single thing has an energetic signature associated with it, whether it's the electromagnetic and information signature of a toxin or of a pathogen, or like I was saying earlier, of these concretized energetic complexes left in our field after a trauma, and all the unmetabolized emotions that we weren't equipped to deal with at the time. These things all have a reverberation that provide misinformation and disrupt the translation of our blueprint. So when you look at it like that, what is healing really? But it's removing what's in the way of a more perfect translation of our blueprint. So it's basically removing or transmuting all of this dissonance in the system.
Damn, that was good.
Awesome.
Wow.
Amazing. So Kristen, who actually was the one that found you and said we have to get you on to speak, just sent me a message asking if we could ask you who your favorite chakra or energy anatomy related authors are.
Well, okay. So early on, I was influenced by Barbara Ann Brennan, and later by Eileen McCusick. So Eileen McCusick was the person who measured the human biofield with sound tuning forks. I don't know if you know of her. And then I was really influenced by the work of Dr. Pop, and he was looking at light emissions of the biofield. And then later I went to the Academy of Intuition Medicine, which is a school that was formed by Dr. Francesca McCartney. And she is an incredible teacher, and she's written a book as well. And just went through a process of really learning how to tune into each chakra and other different aspects of the energetic anatomy.
Thank you. I bet Kristen's already ordering those books. I see Anne with a hand up whenever you're ready.
Hello. Wow, this is incredible. So I also, like Joe mentioned, watched your video earlier. And I'm so excited to be here because I've been on a healing path, and I'm really I'm intrigued by this because I've been, I think, like a lot of your patients who have gone to a bazillion doctors and haven't, received a lot of the support and been extremely discouraged by that. But I've had multiple brain injuries. So there's a lot of interesting complications. And I've just finally found an amazing functional neurologist that is treating me. And I'm seeing improvement. It's slow because this has been over a long period of time. But I'm seeing improvement. But I'm also, along with that, like you said earlier about working on it from many levels, I've been working on this energetically for quite a few years too. And, clearing this dissonance. So, that really resonates with me because I feel like that's the path I'm on. Like that's my part. I can do that part. And then I've got the clinicians that are brilliant in their field that are doing their part. And I've also been doing a body-centered meditation. Nice. So I'm doing all of this and I'm seeing improvement. I mean, my doctor is much more impressed with my improvement than I am because I think she explained it to me, like as your brain starts healing, you have more capacity to see the loss that you've had.
Yes.
So what's really been the biggest struggle for me is, and I think these are the dissonances that are been patterned, from really early on, is that my go-to is a real low vibration. So, I've dealt with really, I keep going back into this deep level of despair, and then I'm not able to resonate with maybe where I'm moving to, if that makes any sense. So I guess going to a question, so I've been doing a body-centered meditation, and I don't know how that might be similar to or different from, what you suggest. So I'd like to know maybe more about that. And if there are any other maybe guidances that you could give me to help bring me maybe like a level of stability, that I'm trying to find that level of stability, as I ride through the surf, basically. And the waves knock me down, right? And then I get back up. And then the waves knock me down. But that's exhausting too. So any suggestions that you could share would be great.
Okay. Yeah. And when you mentioned despair, is it despair about your physical issue?
Yes, that, but it takes over so quickly that it like, it's like water. You spill a glass of water and it just goes everywhere, just like that. So it feels like that to me. Like the despair could be, so right now I have exercise intolerance. So I tried to, walk my dog a little bit. And by the time I got back to the house, I was really depleted, which brings up all my symptoms. And then, the slightest bit of something emotional then triggers me. It's like I don't have any resilience, I guess, maybe a good
Mhm,
way of saying it.
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
In a physical and an emotional and mental way.
right. Yeah, it's interesting. I think first let me comment on the physical level because I see that there probably are some secondary issues that have developed, after these brain traumas for you,
Mhm.
because it's been more stressful to do various things. I think that's possibly depleted, potentially your endocrine system, and created some other physical issues that might need to be addressed to then to help you to feel better and have more resiliency, and to facilitate the healing work in the brain that you're doing. So I'd say that's one thing I would encourage you to do, is to find a functional medicine type doctor that's willing to look at your situation very holistically instead of exclusively focusing on just brain trauma. So maybe you've already done that.
I have been to quite a few actually, and
Yeah.
I don't get any forward movement there.
Uh-huh.
It's much more aggravation, almost like a homeopathic remedy, like it's an aggravation versus
Yes.
a solution. So
Yeah.
that's been frustrating. That's added to my level of frustration.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I would imagine so. But I think that also a body-centered meditation, I mean, what I'm referring to is really working on grounding, because you can think about the brain as part of your electrical system. And just like, an electrical system is not going to work well if it's not grounded. Your nervous system is not going to work well if it's not grounded. So I would focus a lot of your body-centered meditation on grounding your body, grounding your auric field, grounding all of your cells. So every cell has magnetic elements to it, and just imagine them kind of like being tethered down to the magnetic field of the earth. And then really imagine plugging in your nervous system. So, from the nerves coming out of the spinal cord, and the entire brain itself. I would envision it grounded to the earth, and earth vibration kind of moving up into your nervous system, because it's like a vital nutrient for your cells. And the nervous system requires that nutrient in order to heal.
Okay. Okay. So my sort of body-centered practice has been more softening to let go of the tension in my
Mhm.
physical body, and then letting breath come through me, and then using the breath to transmute whatever comes up.
Mhm. Mhm.
So whether, emotional things, energetic things. So that's been more my focus with that.
Mhm.
So
That
this,
sounds beneficial too.
but I like this idea of grounding because I definitely don't feel grounded a lot. So,
Yeah, you'll find that it will be so instrumental to healing your nervous system. I actually started working in the Department of Neurobiology when I was in medical school, and was looking at chick neurites and how they moved and grew and migrated in kind of like a model that was mimicking the brain. And the electromagnetic fields were absolutely essential to the migration of these neurons and the healing. So just, I'm referring back to that because like the magnetic aspect is just critical. And so you think about the earth, this magnetic body, as going to be providing new a nutritional vibration for your neurons.
Thank you, Anne. I had a quick question. You had mentioned about reality creation. I was wondering if there's anything you have done, if there's either any rituals you do to create your own reality or any you've done to create your own reality. I'm super fascinated by that type of stuff.
Yeah. Well, one key is to not believe what comes in through your senses wholeheartedly. So we tend to see what we see and hear what we hear and experience what we experience and think that that's the truth, right? And have emotional reactions to what we see and hear and all of that. And it's pretty difficult to not get swept up into the reality that's current if you believe it wholeheartedly. And it's I think really important to observe what you see and hear and what's going on around you, and try to disengage emotional responses to what you're observing. And that means, like, if someone does something, instead of getting excessively angry about it, or let's say you're not liking this pandemic environment, instead of focusing on that and getting really upset about it, just be aware of it, and then try to kind of maintain some autonomy. Because if you can maintain some autonomy and you're not letting your emotions get kind of like whipped around, you will be able to harness the power to intend something different. So I think it's really important to envision something you want to see happen. So if it's a healthy body, envision that. If it's a abundant life, envision that in as much detail as you possibly can. And then intend it will happen. You just have to have that kind of that intention that you can choose that. This is a life that you can choose.
Appreciate that. Sometimes it's easier said than done to avoid those
It's
emotional
easy, but
draws.
it's like a martial art.
Yeah, like a ninja. I see Bonnie with a hand up. Thank you for that response, by the way.
Mhm.
Hi. Hi, Dr. McDougall. Thank you so much for being here. And I have a question. I'm just curious. I know you touched upon chakras, and I was just wondering, do you touch upon meridians as part of your healing modalities for your patients?
I do. I don't write much about them in my book. I'm not trained in Chinese medicine, but I do believe that the meridians are channeling energy throughout the body. And so, for example, I do a technique in my office called Akmos, which is where it's kind of it's a technique that is influenced by traditional Chinese medicine and the meridians. And it's looking at pieces of misinformation and the energetic signatures of those pieces of misinformation and where they're lodged in the body. And then we work on pulling those out of the system towards something that they're in resonance with, and then rebalancing the body and the compensation the body's had to do around that energetic stress. So we basically are identifying, removing, and then rebalancing. But we're removing them through energetic meridians. So it seems that misinformation, can affect someone globally, but it often does so in a very local spot also. And you can almost think about these energetic meridians as like the kind of electrical system of the body. And the meridian itself is almost like a dimmer switch, can turn it on, turn it off, turn it all the way off, and so sometimes like that dimmer switch gets disrupted, and maybe it's amped way down and the energy's not flowing properly, or it's stuck open or something like that. So it's a matter of kind of rebalancing so that the energy can move and flow properly in the body.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bonnie. I see Joe coming back for round two. Go ahead, bud.
All right. I just noticed something too, because I just went through, I think I told you, I went through a ceremony. I did a plant medicine, or actually I wouldn't even call it a plant medicine because it comes from a toad called Bufo alvarius. And I had an extreme fascial and visceral release through my body. And after that experience, a lot of things that have really been this is the best way to say it is, and I said it to Kyle earlier today when we were talking, I really don't feel like a prisoner inside my body at all anymore. And I've noticed through what most of people are talking, that is something that was a massive release, that I think a lot of what going through these different things and experiences that people are dealing with, whether it's Lyme disease or neurological disorders or anything like that, it seems like what you're talking about is it comes from it's buried in your fascia tissue in places that we don't really know where it exists or how it lives there. And when it festers, or it causes the discordance, like you're saying, it messes up the electrical informational signals that are being sent places. And I noticed after the release of it, I had said to Kyle, or I said there are some people I was talking to earlier, that I actually at one point had felt like I had like boiling water, not the heat of it, but just the texture of what it would feel like to have something boiling in my hips. And it shook way all out of my hips. And even since then, like that has been something freedom wise. I didn't even realize I was holding so much tension and gravity in my hip area. But that release has literally made me feel more free within my body and less apt for things like disease or just any discordance whatsoever. So it seems as though,
Wow.
like, yeah, I mean, I really noticed that, like, what I'm hearing is that this stuff really gets stuck in places in our fascia tissue. It's like
Yes.
in our tissues.
Mhm. Absolutely. First, congratulations. That's must be so liberating.
It
But
is.
yes, I think, the fascia connects the entire body. It's like almost every single cell is touching fascia in some way. And so I think it's like this, it's electrical information actually travels through the tissue planes of the fascia. And the fascia wraps around each nerve and wraps around each blood vessel and wraps each muscle and it wraps around each bone. And, it's just every type of tissue, the fascial planes are just kind of weaving through it. And it is a way that we retain dissonant information. It actually kind of creates like tension patterns in the structure of the body itself.
Hmm. Totally. And
Yeah.
I can understand that now. I can actually understand that from a physical experience of releasing it, what that feels like it's almost like when you have someone rub out a knot in your back, if you go to a masseuse, it's almost like that knot was a place, that a kink somewhere in like a hose system of my body that was like just saying, okay, I'm not going to allow this piece of information in. But once the release happened, it was like all of a sudden that misinformation was now getting through where it wasn't allowed to before. And it was an immediate, this like, holy cow, thank goodness that's all over type of thing. Yeah, I mean, I can see a lot of that, man. So I think when you said the body type, it like the grounding meditation, it's so interesting because that was one of the biggest feelings of just being not in so much of my head space of where my body was at, or actually like being in my body space and understanding the relationship of my head space and my body space. And it seems as though like with these grounding meditations that you're offering, that's something very similar, that I feel like you'll get that same experience is the attachment to your understanding of your body mixed with your mind, and their coincidence with one another. So that was awesome.
And just
super
out of
grateful.
curiosity, question for you is, was there an associated awareness that you came to you at the time that this all released in your body, or no?
An awareness in the sense of
Like, did you
experience itself, or
like, was there anything you learned that kind of triggered the release, or was it more on a subconscious level?
I think it definitely happened. It's almost twofold, to be honest with you, because there was definitely a physical feeling of, oh, I physically know something just left me that has been here for a very long time, and it was trying to hold me down or hold back information. And now, then in the days following, really the awareness of, oh my goodness, like something's gone that was there before. And I can't put my finger on it. I can't really, I can't explain it to anybody. I've been trying to, but I can't. But it's not, I don't have, there's something different. And trying to describe it even still right now, it's very ineffable. I don't have the words or the vernacular to put into words the feeling of I'm not being held on to by anything that I was being held on to before. And as the days continue to progress, I see examples of it in conversations, in my writing, in my journal, in daily behaviors and emotional patterns that I used to have daily. I can almost see them as comical now. I can almost watch them arise up and be like, oh, those don't even affect me anymore. Now it's just the brain trying to follow a pattern, but the body's doesn't listen to it the way it used to, and try to, oh, okay, yeah, that's right, we follow along now, and we go through that emotional pattern. That's just like, oh my God, I don't have to do that anymore, type of feeling.
Wow.
So I'm very
Fantastic.
grateful. Very, very grateful. Amazing medicine.
You have us all very curious in this toad, Mr. Longa. But I see, I see Eve with a hand up.
Yes, hi, Dr. Beth. This is absolutely incredible information. I'm really enjoying being with everybody tonight. There was a question in chat that was running through my mind, and so I thought, well, I'll just raise my hand and ask it, because I am sitting here with this grounding mat that I have plugged into the grounded outlet, and I think it was Christine down in chat was asking whether or not there's any effectiveness to this. Now, I've been a grounder, an earthier, whatever you want to call it, for a very, very long time. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I put my bare feet out on the deck, and I sit on the stoop for about a half an hour with the dew on my feet. It's just amazing. But the bud is in the cold winter months and in the evenings, and sitting here right now, I have my bare feet on my mat. Now, I can't say that the mat does anything for me, except for I might believe that the mat does something for me. And that belief, we all know, is so powerful. But I can say from my own experience that being out on that ground, it's like, I can't wait to get my little feet out there in the wet morning dew. So I know there's that connection. But the question is, for me and Christine, I think it was, is the product itself, the grounding mat. Would you have any information on that, about its effectiveness?
Yeah. So are you talking about the earthing mat?
It's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there's really good research on that. And so, as you can tell and palpably feel when you're standing with your feet on the earth. And so it's not only grounding off things that are unwanted, but you're pulling electrons up through your skin, of your feet into your body. And that we need those electrons because they charge the batteries of our cell membranes. And our cell membranes collectively total up, like 37 trillion volts of electricity. And so we need to supply the electrons for that charge. And so I do believe standing on the earth is going to do a better job of it, but the research on the earthing mats are really good. And so, I think that you are getting something out of that. I sleep with one on my bed and have for years and years.
Yeah, I have the mat, and then I have the wristbands that you wear. But I wondered, was it just my belief? I do know that going outside is more than my belief, because it has become an addiction for me. So I said,